So I wanted to make this video to give another perspective on the idea that most people say that talent, or no, most people say hard work beats talent. That's the common kind of phrase. And I wanted to explore that idea. I've made a video about this before, but I wanted to kind of just talk about it again and see what I come up with now this time. Because I don't think, I think sometimes, people just say things and, and it just becomes kind of like what everybody says. And I think sometimes there's different ways of looking at it. And so that might not necessarily be true, that maybe you could look at it another way and see if it's not true. And so the adage I'm talking about is the hard work beats talent, right? Or hard work is better than talent, or hard work is more important than talent. And the idea is to explain what this means. It means that if somebody is really talented, let's say somebody is good at, they're gifted, quote unquote, right? If someone is good at, let's say somebody's good at swinging a bat, or doing math, right? If you have someone who is young and they're good at it, but they don't really care about it too much, that somebody who is really bad and has no talent, okay? If they keep trying, that they can somehow surpass the person that is, quote unquote, born knowing how to do it. And so, and most people would say that a lot of the hardest working people and the most successful people are people who have done just that. What I mean by that is that, what I think is, I don't know that I agree with that. There's a lot going on, of course, because there's the idea of what does it mean to be talented, right? Like, what does talent mean, right? Like, what exactly does it mean when we say someone is talented? Because at the end of the day, is anybody really born knowing how to be good at something? Is a snake that does things by instinct, is a snake is a snake talented at being a snake? You know what I mean? I guess biologically speaking, there are just certain instincts that people are born with. But, when it comes to humanity, we have instincts, right? The instincts would be things like breathing, right? Or, how to move without thinking, right? We move and ambulate without thinking about how our arms and legs move. So, but that doesn't mean that, when I think about how, that's kind of the talent, I guess, if you want to consider that. But when we talk about talent, we don't think about it that way, right? Because really, if you think about it, that is talent. And so instead, what people talk about when they say talent, they mean more things like abilities, like knowing how to play an instrument, or being a good reader, or being a good, having good social skills, right? But I would argue, all of these things are man-made. They're not really based on nature. And it could be, like, I agree that there could be a brain, right? There could be a component. Perhaps some people have kind of, they're wired a certain way that makes them better at athleticism or whatever it is. But I would argue that there is a level of plasticity, and plasticity means malleability, or the ability to change, I guess, because, when you make plastic, you can make plastic into different shapes, right? That's kind of, so the idea that the brain shapes itself into its surroundings, and how well it does that is a good thing. And so, the way I look at it, when I look at the brain, I don't know if I can draw a brain. When you look at a brain, it, the thing is, the brain kind of adapts to whatever it is. If you don't teach someone how to speak a language, the brain becomes there's actually a closing point. There's a point, and where, and this has been done by kind of research, but there's a, based on, I guess, where they have found people who were unlettered, and I guess famous cases in psychology where there have been humans that don't, that are uncivilized, I guess, that have never, and so they're not able to develop language, kind of like Tarzan, right? Where Tarzan, the story, right, he couldn't speak, and so what that means is that the brain kind of adapts, and it cannot know, like the brain adapts, but it doesn't know. There's a limit, it's not like it reaches a certain point upon which it can't expand, and it stops very young, actually. So if you don't learn how to speak, you'll never know how to speak, because it's almost like your brain doesn't know. So it doesn't mean that they couldn't have spoken. It's just that their brain never spoke. And once they reach a certain age, it's not possible for them to learn it, so to speak. No matter what, that concept escapes them, even though, as crazy as that sounds. And the reason why I'm saying that is because doesn't the same apply with, let's say, athleticism, or knowing how to sing, or knowing how to speak, or having social skills? And so when we tell people that, well, if you practice, you might be able to sort of overcome that. When you tell people that if you practice, you can overcome that, is that really true? Because actually, if, someone who cannot speak, right, it's not possible for them to ever become able to speak. And yet, over someone who does, and yet we don't, speaking is not even that complex, right? It's not even right? It's something that almost everybody in the modern world can do. We don't even consider that to be a speaking skills, but it is. It's actually a form of high intelligence. But the thing is, for people who, I'm using this as an analogy because maybe everything is like that, right? We overemphasize, for example, the ability to play instruments, or even to do math. Like, math is no different than learning how to speak. We just all know how to speak, but if we all knew how to do math, it wouldn't be a hard thing to do. And so in my view, I don't even think math is hard, in my opinion, especially the math that is taught in, like, your typical high school or 4-year degree, the first 4 years of college. Like, it's not hard math. It's like the basics. It's not even, and so I think it's interesting, because the reason why I bring this up is because maybe math and all these subjects that we say are quote unquote hard are actually not hard at all. And in fact are just, they're actually, they're easy. But for some reason we overvalue them, because in our society we need to overvalue we need to overvalue what we're doing, and yet because we need to make ourselves feel important. And not only that, but then there's the principle of gatekeeping, where sometimes we make something seem hard because you might limit the access or the ability for people to learn, to gain that knowledge, even though that knowledge isn't hard. But if you gatekeep it, people won't, of course they're not going to be good at it, because you're not teaching them, right? And that's another reason why, you can make the argument that why isn't the information available, right? Like, let everyone learn it. Every high schooler should have access to all of the learning, because it's not hard. And yet, and that would I don't know, that obviously that would revolutionize everything, but for some reason, and I say that because I don't think it's hard at all. I don't think these subjects are difficult. And so what I mean by that, what that means in terms of, having a gift, I know we got to go back to what I was saying before, is that, I guess what I'm saying is that what we consider gifts, or what we consider talent, quote unquote, is the ability to learn a lot of these man-made knowledges, I guess, man-made, principle or disciplines like math, science, English, right, and literature, but writing, all of these, they can be learned. I mean, just the same way that we can speak. And so and couple that with what I just said, that people, when they're very young, there's a limit to where you can learn something, right? And so it's possible that somebody might not ever be good at math, but it's not that it's not that you were born like that. It's just that you perhaps were not exposed to it, or perhaps your mind somehow sealed itself off to it. And so is that really talent? Do you know what I mean? Is that really, and will your hard work ever be able to overcome that? And just as Tarzan is never going to be able to speak, so in the same way, you're never going to be able to overcome it. And then you might say, well, what about hard work? Like, maybe you can hard work. And you always hear, like, a business story of someone who, we all hear about in business, actually. They always talk about how C students are the leaders over A students, right? Or A students, work for C students, right? We've all heard that. And what that means, let's write that down, right? Like, A students, or no, I think it goes, well, you can say it different ways, but C students work for A students, right? That's kind of the adage, the saying. And what that means is that, oh, well, and we always hear that about business in particular, that, somebody builds a company and, there's like a factory or something. Somebody builds a company, and then, the people, and then you hear about their story, and they're like, oh, I just worked all day, and then I was able to succeed. And so really, that's just an effect of our economy, right? Our economy allows for someone, you don't have to be the most intelligent to succeed in our economy, right? In our world. In the world of today. And so I don't know that means anything. That now you might say, well, that means talent doesn't matter, right? It means that it means that hard work beats talent, right? But I disagree with that. I think, well, yeah, just because someone is successful doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that hard work beats talent. It just means they succeeded in our economy, which is cool. You know what I mean? Because I think, obviously, whenever you meet someone successful, I think, no matter what, there's something about them that's extraordinary, right? It might not be their intelligence. It could be just that they're more compassionate, or it could be that they're able to network, or it could be, or it could be a variety of things like you. And so that's what I'm saying, is that you shouldn't use that as an adage for life. Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to make the case, and I would argue the opposite. I believe that talent beats hard work. And that's what makes sense. And to me, some people might say, well, that means that it's hopeless, right, for some people. But I would say that I also think that, for example, certain things like basketball, for example, right, you have to be tall to play it. It's like, wow, you're talented. It's like if they made the hoops and the courtyard smaller, smaller people could be good at basketball too if they made the rims shorter, or so it's just, that's not an example of talent. That's just, they're kind of limiting the playing field. So see, you can manipulate the conditions in such a way that only certain types of people, in this case tall people, only they could ever compete and be good at that, right? And so I don't know that I would call that necessarily having to, obviously you're born doing that, but it's an artificial activity. Does that make sense? It's not, I don't know. It's not something, I guess you say it's not as special as it could be because it's just the tallest people who can do it. It's still cool, of course, but, that just shows that you could do that with anything, right? If I, let's say I have a difficult subject, in let me like draw a book or something, a difficult subject, and you had people learning, and it's a difficult subject, but I only teach a few people this subject. I mean, that really special, right? Does do the people are everyone's gonna think, oh wow, they're such a genius for learning? Yeah, but I gate kept it, and we talked about that, right? The whole idea of gatekeeping. I limited you. I prevented everyone else from learning it. So is that really intelligence? Not really. Is that really, you know what I mean? Like, it's just completely manipulated. I'm saying there's not much you can extract from that. Anybody could have done it, perhaps. And, or a larger amount of people could have learned that topic. And I believe that this is the case in a lot of the, when it comes to business schools at the graduate level, right? A lot of it is just information that is, I mean, it is sort of, obviously it's not something that's general knowledge, but it's something that there's no reason why you shouldn't understand it. You know what I mean? There's no reason why it needs to be hidden away in a $500 textbook. You know what I mean? Economics textbook or whatever it is, or science textbook, right? A lot of these subjects, they're kind of walled off. And really, I actually believe a high schooler could learn it. There's no reason why. It's really not that hard. And then the last thing, of course, is are just teachers that just don't teach properly. Like, there are a lot of teachers who they don't really teach properly. And so that's why people don't learn it. If we had good teachers, I think that's a hard thing, though, right? Because most people, what are the chances that you find someone that is willing to have the patience and also the ability to say it in such a way that other people can understand? And so teaching is a hard thing as well. So that's why it's tricky. It's tricky why you might not be good at something. But generally speaking, so I've talked about a lot of things now, but I wanted to focus on talent and why it beats hard work. And my view is that with talent, it's talent to me, as I've said, the idea of being born doing something, I don't believe anyone's born. Like, obviously, a snake is good at being a snake. Humans can be good at learning whatever is put in front of them. And so whatever is put in front of you at a young age, that becomes who you are. Believe it or not, those are the formative years. That matters more than anything. And it's not just that, but it's also how you react. And I think humans have the ability to react, something that animals don't do. And so I think even younger sort of, forming humans, okay, humans that are very young, are still able to react. Even if you don't remember it, you are still able to react to what is happening to you. And so sometimes it can be rational or irrational, but let's say you're afraid of something. You never know why somebody might dislike or like something. But, people say, oh, well, you have a knack for it, right? You have a talent. If, somebody could be afraid. The reason why, a young person might not take a piano in a piano lesson is because maybe they were afraid of the piano. Do you know what I mean? It might not have had anything to do with the actual piano itself, as in the actual learning of the piano process, of becoming a pianist. But actually, young people develop irrational fears, or it could be some other reason why, or somebody maybe just had a strong dislike for something, and so they won't learn something. And you might think to yourself, well, and the reason why I say it is because those decisions affect what we learn and who we become. And so by the time you are older, right, once you reach grade school or, secondary education, then you start, all of a sudden you become, you see who you are, what you're good at, your talents, quote unquote, but actually they were decisions that you made. Maybe you weren't aware of it, but they were, and they still affect you. And then, of course, you just have to live with those decisions, and you live with those decisions. And the thing is, you might not you might not understand sort of why you're good at what you're good at. And I'm just trying to explain how a lot of it is just stuff that happened at a subconscious level when you were younger. And so, but what I'm trying to say is when it comes to talent, a lot of times it becomes, if you practice so much, it becomes ingrained in you in such a way that somebody who has not, and the reason why I say this is because somebody who is very young could have practiced, whether it's determination, because that's something you could practice too, the ability to do something without budging, without, that's a quote unquote talent. That could be the reason why you succeed in something else over somebody else. Or the ability to stay calm, or the ability to go crazy, or the ability to, for social skills, right? The ability to express yourself and do it in a consistent way that the average human cannot, right? All of those things are things that are formed young, when you are younger. And so as you get older, if you try to develop it's not quite the same, because your brain kind of, at a younger age, it forms itself. So when an older person tries to, and that's what you call talent, what we would call talent. But someone who is younger or older tries to do the same, and it will not, you can't compete, because your whole brain has been wired a different way, because you probably have different talents. So it's not really a matter of that you're not talented. Somebody, for example, who has very bad social skills, or let's say somebody who has very good social skills, they might be talented at social skills, but that came at a cost. And that's the other principle, I guess, is the idea that you cannot be good at everything. So it came at a cost. So what does that mean? That means that there's a cost to what you do. So that means if you're good at social skills, that means you're not going to be good at something else. Maybe you're good at social skills, dancing, right? But then in that case, and maybe you're I don't know, you're good at who knows what else, dressing up, right? You're well, that's not really a skill, but like, let's say you're good at maybe you might play a specific game, let's say, right? But then someone else, they might never have practiced their social skills, right? But then they might be good at something else, right? They might be good at math, or they might be good at putting things together, right? Like working with their hands, right? With the hands, working with tools, the hand coordination, the ability to get things done, basically. And then another person might have spent a lot of time just carrying stuff and working, just doing grunt work, because that's kind of a skill too. That's another development, a mental development. And so your muscles and your mind, I feel like they both work together. But here's the thing. A person who has strong social skills, they might be good at dancing too, but there's a limit to all the things, right? There's a limit to what you can be good at. There's usually like a list of 5 or 6 things that you're good at, right? And then there's some things that you're okay at, or I should say there's only a few things that you're very good at, and then the rest you're kind of, basic, and then a lot of things that you're bad at. Well, someone who's good at social skills, they're going to be good at social skills, but for certain, they're going to be bad at other things. Maybe they're not creative, or maybe that person is bad at thinking, or maybe that person is bad at computers, or maybe that person is bad at understanding. I don't know. Like, in other words, you can't be good at everything. And so, and that kind of stays with you forever. I know we live in a world where people think like that you can change or improve. Practice, I guess, but the thing is, there's a limit, I believe, just as we talked about with plasticity. There's a limit to how good, how once your brain has been formed, there is plasticity when you're young, and there's still some plasticity as you get older, but it becomes solidified. In other words, it's not plastic anymore. It becomes stiff. So as you get older, by the time you come of age, okay, you are not, you are kind of, you are not going to be, you can't change as much anymore. And that's where by the time, someone is 18, you can say, wow, this person has this talent, the other person has another talent. And then, but the thing is, can someone who is not talented in one thing be able to surpass someone who does have talent, who has been doing it for years, ever since they were young? Can they surpass them? And I mean, the answer to that is yes, like from an economic standpoint, right? Because our economy allows anybody. I mean, somebody who has no skills can become, popular and can become successful. So that's not, does that make sense? That's not the issue. Like that's, so, or I should say, well, I guess that is kind of what most people are alluding to. So maybe it is the issue. Because I guess maybe that's what people care about, right? When we see a success story, is it possible to succeed and not have the talent that most people would think, right? Can you be a musician and so, or I guess, no, the better thing is, can you be successful and not necessarily have had the talent yourself? And I would argue that I think it's misplaced. The idea is misplaced because actually, talent, I believe that in those cases, as I just said before, the person who has talent can, the person, or I should say, that everyone has something that makes them succeed. So in those examples, if somebody is good at business, they might say, well, I was really bad at math. Yeah, but you don't need to be good at math, or, well, I mean, usually it helps, I guess, to be good at math. But in order to, obviously, whatever they did, they didn't need to be good at every single thing that you might think you have to be. And that's really what it boils down to. So there is still a talent there. It's just that, and so that's why I'm saying that when people say that hard work beats talent, it implies that some people don't have talent, that there wasn't a talent there, and that somehow they just worked hard and that's how they won. And kind of like the tortoise and the hare, right? Where the turtle kind of beats the rabbit. The rabbit is talented at running, but because the turtle moved, that they won. But I would argue that, if the hare jumped, it could have defeated the turtle. Does that make sense? So is that even true, that hard work beats talent? Well, yeah, I guess if the hare doesn't move, but if the hare does move, the turtle can never win. Does that make sense? And so that's what I'm talking about. That's why I believe that talent beats hard work. Like, yes, sometimes people who work hard and don't have the talent, they succeed. But if the person that had talent, it would have been better, right? We would have perhaps had a better product. Or you could argue that another way is that maybe the person that worked hard, maybe the talent, and see, this is where it gets complicated, because maybe everyone is talented in some way. And so maybe it's just incorrect, the whole thing, this idea that, well, some people have talent, some people don't. No, everybody has talent. You're talented. There's some talent that you have. Every single person, even somebody who sits around all day, they have a talent of some kind, right? Whether it's, maybe they have a talent of thinking. Maybe they have a talent of, somebody who spends a lot of time on their chair, you're going to have talent. A lot of it might be mental, but it might not be valuable in the eyes of people, but it's still, it counts as a talent, and so, but going back to, the idea of talent, like I keep coming back to this, and I'm trying to see if, I can think of new ideas, but really, ultimately, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I guess the turtle and the hare, the tortoise and the hare, is a kind of a good analogy of what we're talking about here. Okay, there's a turtle and there's the rabbit, right? And now I can't draw on this, on this device, But even if I was drawing on paper, it wouldn't be that much better. Maybe it'd be a little better, but either way, I'm not too much of an artist. But here's the thing, like the turtle and the hare, it looks like a rhinoceros, but it's a rabbit. Now the rabbit, it's the thing with the rabbit is that if I guess what I'm saying is that no, the turtle cannot beat the hare. That's what I'm saying. So I disagree with, because most people they're running around saying that hard work beats talent, and trying to kind of sell false hope to people that, hey, you know what, you actually don't need to be talented. You could just, and I would disagree with that. Like, I think, no, you have to be talented. And so then the people will say, so the solution to this problem, in my view, talent beats hard work. And what is the solution to that? Because people say, oh, no, well, I wasn't born with it, so I guess I can't succeed. And I don't know that that's true. First of all, maybe you're not talented in that way, but maybe you have another talent that can help you get ahead. Or either do that or become talented. In other words, get that talent. And in other words, I believe that humans attain talent, that it's not that you're not born with it, is what I'm saying. And so the solution is, people will say, well, just work hard, and then implying as if they never become talented, but they just kind of, and that's true, that's, a product of our economy, that you can succeed. But generally speaking, what I'm saying is your two options are either to use another talent that you have to succeed, or to become talented. In other words, get the talent so that you are talented. But that might not be possible, as we said, because of the plasticity, right? The plasticity of the brain, it might not be possible. And so now, that's why I'm saying talent, you can't beat certain people. And so the best you can do sometimes is to just work with what you have and see whatever you can do and use whatever skill that you do have, because you might have something that they don't. So even though, one person might have the talent to move, the other person might have the talent to create, new moves, right? So maybe this person is not creative, but this person, maybe the rabbit is not creative, but the turtle is creative. So all of a sudden, see, now you have a new characteristic, a new something new that distinguishes and could allow the turtle to succeed, right? In other words, you're just like I said before, you're using your talent that you do have that someone else might not have. So just because someone else, and this is why I tore down before. I tore down the whole thing, right? Didn't I say there are people out there who are amazing violinists, but they can't compose a song? And then there could be someone who can't read music, but their mind is able to come up with melodies. So do you see how that principle, do you see how I'm talking about that? That's where the idea that that's what I'm talking about, is that you could be talented, quote unquote, and not, and be, or I should say, of course, the talented person is going to defeat someone who is not talented, always. So basically, you can't compete with a talented person, because they've spent years, they've already done the sacrifice. They weren't born with it. But what you can do is you can either build up another skill, or use another skill that you have that the other person might not have, and that will allow you to to succeed in a different way, right? So the other thing I was gonna say is, when it comes to talent, so the solution is, I believe that talent always beats hard work, right? So then if you are doing hard work, and this is important to understand, because otherwise you might spend your life doing, trying to work hard at something, and you're never going to be as good at, because you're basically practicing the wrong thing. That's basically what's happening. Because if you are, it's similar to, or it's kind of like how people who learn language as a second, they never, almost always, they never sound as good as the original person. And it's the same thing, right? Because the brain and perhaps the mouth is not as plastic as you get older. And so they cannot do those sounds. It's the same thing with anything that you learn. You're not going to be as good at it as someone who kind of was as native to it. And so you will never be as good. You'll never get to that point. And there's nothing bad about it. I mean, that's why I'm saying it's important to understand that, because you could waste your time trying to do basic things that someone who is talented never had to practice doing. That's a great analogy, believe it or not, right? Somebody learning how to play a guitar in their 30s, okay? While somebody who has known how to play guitars since they were young, you're never going to be as good as that person who learned it when they were young. Never, probably. Now, I mean, I don't know how guitar playing is, though, because it may be possible, believe it or not. There are certain skills that, perhaps could be, but, or I guess you could say you could probably get to a good enough skill. So maybe that's not a good example. But I'm using this in the most extreme examples, where the idea of becoming a savant, or not savant, becoming kind of the best, a virtuoso, right? Of the best of certain kinds. And this is good because, like I said, I think I'm saying this so that you understand the principle, but also I'm giving you the solution, which is that you can never compete with someone who is talented. Someone who has talent is always going to beat you. Therefore, the only way, don't waste your time learning something that someone who does have talent knows without understanding it, right? I mean, in the same way, that's why I don't think people should learn languages, right? Like if somebody speaks English, right, and somebody else tries to learn, or let's say somebody speaks Japanese since they were young, let's say Japanese, and then someone else tries to learn Japanese as an adult, you're never going to get to that point, probably. It will take you a long time. And the thing is, but why would you? Because the average Japanese person, when they were young, they didn't put any effort into learning it. So why should you? That's what I'm trying to wake you up so you realize, don't do the hard work. That's the whole point. Use the talent that you have and forget about you cannot. That's why at the end of the day, what this video is about is talent beats hard work. You cannot beat, you can't. It's a lie. And people say if you work hard, you can. That's what the movies, and I'm making this argument because just as a counterpoint. I mean, yes, in a way it's true. It's true. I understand. See, two things can be true at the same time. For some reason, that seems to be something that people don't understand in today's world. But basically, yes, it's true that the C student works for an A, or wait, I meant to say the A students work, I meant to say A students work for C students. Whatever. All right, well, I corrected myself there. But what I'm saying is that, yes, it is true that people who are talented, or I should say that hardworking people can succeed, right? A lot of these CEOs, they say that. They say, I was just an average person. That is true. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that you can't succeed. I'm just saying that in pure talent and in pure power and in pure, for the sake of the purity of actually doing the thing in earnest, that's not true. And that you should understand that. And so the solution to that is that you should become, or what did I say? That you should either become talented, but you're not going to be able to become talented, right? In some cases you can, actually. So that's another thing too to keep in mind. There are certain skills that it doesn't take too long to become good at it. Do you know what I mean? Like most skills from a job, right? You can be good at it within a year, okay? 6 months for most people, but a year for sure, right? So it's the same thing with, and so in that case, you might say, wow, talented, it's not really a talent in that case, in my view. That doesn't count as a talent. So don't worry about these little things that only take a year. Yeah, if something takes only a year to learn, well, geez, that's not really even a talent. That's just a skill. And so anybody can do that. But I'm talking about those talents where people spend years learning, but something that's somewhat complex. And what's crazy is that most of it is man-made, and so it's actually easy. That we already talked about that too. And so then how do you become you? So talent always beats hard work is what I'm saying. And my view is, yes, I understand that sometimes hardworking people succeed. And so some people, that's why they'll look, they might disagree and say, well, and so I agree with that. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that going back to this, in its purest essence, like even though our economy allows people who are not talented to succeed, it allows them to succeed. Nevertheless, someone who is talented they might not always make it, but they will always defeat the person who, even if they work hard, even if they have, it's not even just about hard work. Talent beats everything, okay? Talent beats hard work. It beats money. It beats, prestige. It beats, talent beats everything. If someone is good at something, it doesn't matter how fancy you look or how or what degree you have or what accolades or awards you might have. None of that matters. If someone who is talented, they'll defeat you. Does that make sense? Like talent is more important than anything, actually. Talent always wins. It wins everything. It doesn't matter if somebody could be the most, I guess what I'm saying is somebody could be talented and be a nobody from some random place, and they can defeat the most prestigious person who gets straight A's and has all the awards, but doesn't have the talent, right? Or doesn't have the exact talent. Some people have extraordinary talents that are so talented that no one on this planet has it. That's possible. That's what I'm talking about. So you can't beat it. And I think we live in a world today where people, they think that they can just kind of win their way, or you know what, well, just work hard. And I see this a lot because I see this with a lot of college students, and they're working hard, but a lot of times they're wasting time. They're wasting time kind of pretending like they're doing something. I don't know. I'm not really a fan of kind of, in the undergraduate schools where they give you like these exploratory classes, where they do little, you learn a little bit about different things, and that's fine, but it's very cursory, and and you're not really, it's just there to make you feel kind of like you did something interesting to expand the mind, but it doesn't give you enough breadth, or it doesn't give you anything to be good at it, right? And so it's just a little taste of something, and I see a lot of people put a lot of effort into doing that, and that's why I'm saying that, like, it's a waste of time. That's why it's important to understand this. And that's why I stand by what I'm saying, which is that, yes, I understand that hard work beats talent. Yeah, and, in some cases that is true, I guess. Okay, this is true, quote unquote, in some instances, right? When it describes, when it describes how people succeed in our economy sometimes, right? But my view is talent, talent beats everything. Okay, it beats everything. So, right, and I say that because at the end of the day, just like I said before, sometimes somebody might feel like they deserve something, but you're kind of born with it. And so, but that's not even accurate true, right? Like I just described how people become talented. So you're not actually born with it, but there are certain skills that people have spent years doing, sometimes from a young age, sometimes continuing on to adulthood. And those skills carry on, and it could be something, you could have a circumstance that would allow someone to be so talented at something that no one on this planet probably has ever done, has ever had the opportunity, right? When you think of someone like Aristotle, these Greek philosophers, they spent a lot of time kind of sitting around. They lived in an age where there was a relative level of freedom, where they could kind of explore, and they were doing just kind of, crazy things that I don't think the average person today has that much time to do that. So they were talented in other ways, and I bring that up because that's what I'm talking about, is there are people out there who have certain talents, and it comes from being, and that no one on the planet has at the same way. It could be, or very few would have that same talent. But there are some things that are so specific that you could say that they're the only person on the planet who could, and it could be not something physical. It could be something mental. It could be their ability to think, or the way that they analyze, or the way that they approach things. Those are all things that are subject to the ability to be talented. And so what I'm saying is, you can't compete with someone like that. If someone has a talent for, it doesn't matter how hard you work, right? The talented person wins. And so in my view, whether you succeed or not, that's different, or whether the talented person even wants to succeed. Sometimes the talented people don't figure out how to succeed. So there's just every single variable and possibility there's all kinds of scenarios or reasons for why things happen the way they do. And so it's a combination, and nobody is good at everything. But what I'm trying to say is, I think this is so important to understand, because when you realize that you're not talented at something, you need to stop trying to get better at it, because you will never get to that level. That's what I'm trying to say. So I'm actually helping you out, because it means you should focus on your strengths. And so talent beats hard work. So don't. Now, that being said, if you want to practice something just for fun, if you want to learn Japanese, even though you'll never be as good as a native person, that's fine for your own personal, gratification or whatever, for your own. But that doesn't. I'm just saying, if you're trying to, don't think that you can get to a level of expertise that someone with talent could get. And then that's not saying that there couldn't be things that humans can go beyond what's even documented in our universities and in our scholastic, or even in our current way of thinking. Like, there's more to humanity, I believe, than what is even being said right now, what is even being talked about. There are more math theories that have yet to be discovered, I believe. There are entire science and math principles and concepts that we have not, that someone just hasn't come up with it yet. Someone hasn't created the rules for it. And so that's what I believe in. So, and so we have yet to get there. Like, we need to kind of humble ourselves and stop thinking that we know everything, or that somehow, and I think that's another good reason to believe this, right? Because if you see, because it humbles you. It makes you realize, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be as good as this. And then in my view, I don't think you should waste your time trying to beat someone who is talented, because someone who is. But that doesn't mean, again, you can't do it just for fun, or that you can't, if you do it just for fun, that's fine. And then, but yeah, so ultimately, I mean, if I had to choose between talent beats hard work, or hard work beats talent, I'll go with talent beats hard work. I think that is a more important thing to say. Even though I know this is what everyone is saying, right? This is what everyone is saying. I know this is what everyone is saying, but in my view, I think it's important. It's more important to understand that talent beats everything. Talent beats hard work. You can't compete with someone who is talented. You cannot compete. And someone who is talented, is going to be able to, in some ways, it's kind of like, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what awards you get. It doesn't matter how important you might feel. It really is about humility. It's about understanding, wow, this person is about, and it doesn't, like, talent is so powerful that they don't have to do anything, and they beat you. And for some reason, that's hard for today's world to accept. I don't understand that. I don't understand why that's so hard to accept, that someone just standing still is better than you. who has been doing all this. That's crazy to think, but that's basically what I'm saying. That talent is so powerful, the person doesn't even have to move, and they already beat you. And I wish they don't show that in Hollywood. They don't show that in movies. Because if you're working hard and you're thinking, okay, you're sweating, you spent years practicing and preparing, and then this person who hasn't done anything in your eyes, right, from our perspective, how are they beating you? And it's like, what? We've never seen a movie like that, actually. But that's basically what I'm saying. That's the reality. And what I'm saying is, I'm getting you to realize two things. A, you cannot defeat this person. Sometimes, and in your mind, you're going to say they were born with it. I mean, that's one way to look at it. But I just proved that they were not born that way. It's just that they were not born that way. So, but it's going to seem like that, though. It's going to seem like they were born that way. When you come to face to face with a talented person, it's going to seem like they were born that way. Because we don't see the history of people, right? But what I'm saying is, without that person doing anything, they're going to defeat you. And they've already defeated you. And so, but then you might say, well, how can that be? Like, I worked so hard. I spent years. I did this. I did everything that everyone told me to do. And then, but really what it boils down to is, as I already tried to explain or prove, is that person has already done whatever it is that they've done something else, basically. That's outside of what society, they've already done what prepares that person. And so, just like I said, nobody's born talented. It just is a matter of how as the decisions you made when you were a young person. It goes back to the subconscious level. It goes back to temperament. It goes back to all those things. That's what makes someone talented. And so it's not true that they were just born with it, but it's just that they have a set combination of things that make it so that the average human probably hasn't had the same experience or opportunity or understanding that this person has. And so therefore, that's what it means when we say that talent beats everything. You're not going to be able to defeat them. And what's crazy is that people say, well, if I just, they'll just be able to walk in and take it. And it's not because they didn't work for it. See, you would think that they didn't do anything. Well, yeah, they didn't do anything in the eyes of society. They didn't become, but in the back, behind closed doors, I guess in the lab, if you want to say it, or whatever the expression is, they were doing hard. And in fact, they were working harder than you. And so, in fact, it's the opposite. It's actually the opposite. The hard worker, like the talented person, right? Whether it's a talented musician or they spent perhaps their young years sacrificing for hours while you were playing toys, or while do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, they were sacrificing. They sacrificed such an enormous level that you couldn't even imagine it, that they didn't have a normal life, perhaps. That's how you get to that level. So yes, they did. It's just that they did it up front. And that's all you needed to do. And sometimes that is so powerful. It's powerful enough to overcome everything and to defeat everything, to beat everything. Because really, like I said, as adulthood, it's too late. You can't catch up. It's weird, but in a weird way, college should be in when people are much younger. It's too late. I don't know. You're not learning anything when you're in your 20s. It's weird. It's weird how our society is set up. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is when it comes to talent, you will not be able to defeat the talented person. And so, but that's not because they didn't work it. From your perspective, they're not doing anything. But in actuality, the talented person gave their whole life to that, whatever it is that they did. And it's not as easy as you might think. It's not like a simple matter of, this, I'll just do this all day. And then I said, no, because it's a combination of what goes on in the mind and with and you kind of, it's a way of thinking. It's not just your actions, your physical actions, it's how you think about it. So two people can do the same things, and one person could approach it mentally in a different way than the other. So you can't measure it. And that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what talent is. And so therefore you could try and work hard and still not make it. And that's okay. That's good to understand, because it's good to understand because you won't waste time then. So as you can see, it's pretty complicated. And but this is a pretty cool talk. And yeah, hopefully you got something out of it.